Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan from Boredom Sated, and what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the 4 new classes from Advanced Player's Guide and the differences between them as they are now and as they were when they were put in for playtesting. Now, obviously, there's a lot of minor changes that were made that I'm not really going to go over. I'm just going to talk about the major differences between the original characters from the playtest and what they are now. And I'm going to say whether I like the changes or whether I don't like those changes. So, the first thing I want to start with is the Investigator, because I'm going to just go in alphabetical order. So, the first difference in the Investigator is not a very minor one, which is that the Investigator in the playtest started with 6+ intelligence skills, plus their starting ones, whereas in the actual release, they're down to 4+ intelligence skills. So they lost 2 skills to start. However, since they get a skill point every level, and because of the way that the game works, any skill you really want to have, especially because they're an intelligence-based class, is going to be there. So that's a major change. It's a minor change. It's not something that really needs to be worried about, but it's 2 losses of starting skills. Second, and this is actually a major difference, is instead of in the playtest where they started with only several martial weapons, they now just have all martial weapons. So they start with training in all martial weapons instead of just a couple of specific ones. That's a major difference, and considering the way the game works, it's not really going to be that big of a difference because you're probably only going to use the ones they had listed before anyway, which were things like rapier. But it works out the way it does. Now, here is the big change from Investigator to the big change that they made from Investigator the way it was to Investigator the way it is. They changed an ability. Originally, it was called Study Suspect. Study Suspect took an action, and it made it so that you could make a check to see if you could give yourself a small bonus to hit. And that bonus to hit went up as you leveled. You could do some other things with it. But overall, it was literally a very small bonus to hit. They got rid of that completely and put in a new ability called Devise a Stratagem. And this made me feel like you were playing as Sherlock Holmes in the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies. You can see what is going to happen. You take an action to be able to basically make an attack roll to see if this is going to succeed. The difference is, if you're using the correct weapon type, you can use your intelligence modifier to attack instead of your dexterity modifier. And the way this works is you don't actually make the attack. You see if the attack you're going to make is worth making. So you have to take an action to make an attack that you'll have to spend an action for later. But if you roll poorly and you know you're going to miss, just don't do it. You can do something else instead. So that's the main thing that the Investigator brings. It gives you a huge versatility idea because you can say, all right, I'm going to hit with this attack, so I'm going to make it. Or you can say, I'm going to miss with this attack, so maybe I'll do something else. So the Investigator changes a lot there. The other difference is that with the Devise a Stratagem, they made it easier to be able to get that additional damage in there because they made it so that you get the intelligence to hit, and anytime you would hit with an attack that you use Devise a Stratagem for, you add D6's basically sneak attack damage, but it's not sneak attack, it's still precision damage. So anything that's immune to precision still won't take it, but it works very, very well. So that's something that they added. It is a very big change to the class. And again, it makes it feel like it's unique and it makes it feel really good in addition to the other abilities that it had. The other main difference with the Investigator is you have a couple more options, starting options for the Investigator, which is not really a difference because the ones that were there are still there. They changed some first level feats around. They added 3 new ones and got rid of one. They added 3 new second ones. They renamed some. They renamed a lot of them. They switched some 4ths and 6ths. They changed their places. They added new ones. In most of these, the big difference is that they changed the level of feats. They changed the names of some feats, but pretty much every feat that was there in the playtest is still there. They just added some new ones because they didn't want to leave it as bare as it was during the playtest. And if you remember, one of our biggest problems with a lot of the playtest characters was at certain levels, there just weren't enough choices for feats. Second character class is the Oracle. There are a couple of major changes they made to the Oracle. The first change, and this is not really a big one, is that the Oracles have access to light armor. Before, Oracles were no armor only. Now Oracles can wear light armor base. Not a huge deal, but it gives you a little bit of armor bonus. Now here is the biggest change by far. Focus spells. The Oracle was based on focus spells originally. But the thing is that focus in the playtest, the Oracle didn't have a number of focus points. You could keep casting as long as things kept going. So your entire class was based on your use and balance of focus points. And that was really going to be, again, the reason why it's a very different play style, because it has a lot of fun things you can do with those focus points. Well, that's a bit changed. You now have the standard focus point rules of 3. However, all of your focus points are still curse-bound. So you've got to understand how the Oracle Curse works. If you don't understand how the Oracle Curse works, please look at our previous video on the Oracle, and that'll explain it, because I don't want to take the time to do that here. They did keep in the same rules for minor curse, moderate curse, and major curse. So those still work exactly the same way. The big difference here is there's 2 or 3 new things that I have to mention. First, they added 5 more mysteries in. In the playtest, they only had 3. Now they have 8. And some of the new ones they added are fun. One of the ones that I always used to play in Pathfinder 1 was I always used to play the astral. Basically it's space. And stars. And they put that in this one. Although honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the way that they did the rules for it. But not the rules. The spells for it are a little weak in my opinion. But they added a lot of new ones. They have 8 total available, and I think that's a good start. You definitely have more options. The abilities for the curses that were already there, the battle curse and the fire curse and the life curse, are exactly the same. So no real changes came to those. The major other difference that they put in is that when you are overwhelmed by having cast too many revelation spells, something has completely changed. In the playtest, when you were overwhelmed, you were knocked out for 8 hours. Nothing could wake you up. Nothing could do anything. You were screwed. So becoming overwhelmed was literally the thing you had to stop doing and make sure you didn't do it. Well, guess what? What overwhelmed does now is make it so you always have your minor curse, but you just don't have access to your focus spells for the rest of the day until you rest. So you can't get your focus spells back by any means. You can't get rid of your curse by any means, but you don't fall unconscious and basically get killed. So if you go overwhelmed, it doesn't end your day. It just makes it so you weaken your character significantly. So there's a lot more playing around with it involved, but it's not as dangerous and it's not as bad to do that. So I think it made the Oracle a much more playable character, although putting in the maximum 3 focus points makes it so it feels like you're playing more of a standard character rather than playing something really special. One major thing that I've mentioned before is that the battle curse, they did not change the fact that you still never get mastery with your weapons. So your entire basis and the entire way that your character works is by swinging your weapon at people. And you do more damage with it now. The way they change the curses is you attack and you will actually hit harder. But you're never going to hit. You max out as an expert in your weapon and you're never going to get master. So at high levels, you really don't get more powerful. You're playing a spellcaster that wants to be a melee fighter, but you aren't really that good of a melee fighter, so you're going to go back to being a spellcaster. So, again, that's really a big change, and I'm not a huge fan of that. Finally, the other major change they put in, they did get rid of some feats and add some feats, but the major change they put in was in the playtest, when you chose to take an additional revelation spell, what the big thing it did was it made it so that you could once per day cast a spell, and it didn't increase your curse. So if you took the advanced revelation and then greater revelation twice per day at maximum, you could choose not to take you could choose to not increase your curse value. Now, in the previous way it worked, it was more important to not increase your curse value, because if you went to extreme curse, you literally got knocked out. But those abilities have been removed. The abilities are still there for the advanced and greater revelation, but you now no longer get a free without increasing your curse ability. What they did instead was they added a new one at level 12 or level 10, I forget, where what you do is you can spend an action once per day to not increase your curse. So if you're going to cast one of your spells, you can spend an additional action to not increase the curse level, but it's only once per day, and it's a very high level ability. So overall, do I like that? Honestly, I'd have to play it to see. I really liked the idea that you had to control your character a lot by not casting the revelation spells, but I feel like now the revelation spells aren't probably not going to see as much play, and it's an interesting role-playing idea to take an oracle because of the curses, but overall, I feel like they lost some of their luster in the way that they made the change. Okay, that's the big one. Third, the Swashbuckler. They didn't really make a lot of changes to the Swashbuckler. The first change that they made to the Swashbuckler is they added in 2 more styles. So in the playtest, they had 3. In the new one, they have 5. The 2 new styles are the Battle Dancer style, which works with performance, and the Wit style, which works with diplomacy, and you literally make witty retorts to get people off their game, and I thought that was really cool. They got rid of the idea that if you use your skill for initiative, you start the encounter with panache, which I think is a good idea. You have to take an action to get panache, and you don't have to try to come up with a way to open your combats all the time with intimidate or with performance, things like that. So that's a nerf, but it's a nerf that I feel is kind of necessary. Next, they dropped shield block. So you don't have shield block anymore. You can use a shield, but you don't have shield block. And that makes sense. Why would you be able to use... It doesn't really make as much sense for you to get that. And if you really want it, you can take it as a feat anyway. They did add a new feat called Stylish Tricks. And what that does is it basically makes it so that every 4 levels, you can take an additional general skill feat or additional skill feat based on acrobatics or the skill feat that you chose for your style. So you can get a few more skill feats specifically based on your style of play, which I think is a really cool idea. The last real new ability they put in is something called Continuous Flare, which is an 11th level ability that they gave to make it so that if you use your panache skill out of combat, you can now basically get a bonus to certain things that are happening out of combat. So if you use acrobatics out of combat, I think it gives you like a +1 bonus to certain checks for a little while. So it basically gives you out of combat abilities for your panache skills and abilities. Again, like every other class, a lot of the feats got moved around. They added new feats to every level, like especially with the Swashbuckler. They added a lot of new feats, and again, they needed it. If you go back to our previous video, you'll see there's a lot of levels where we said we really wish we had more abilities available. Finally, we have the Witch. So when I read through the Witch, there were a couple of things that I was very happy about and very disappointed with for it. The first thing is very minor, which is they have 1 more skill point at the beginning. So they now get 3+ intelligence instead of 2+ intelligence. They're intelligence characters. It helps out. One bad thing is they lost a spell per level. So they're now back to everyone else's level instead of being at the same level of spell as the sorcerer. So they're now at 3 per level and 2 for a new one instead of 4 per level and 3 for a new one for all casters. So that kind of sucks. It makes it so that the sorcerer is back to being special. Now, this is the big change. When you started the game in the playtest, you started with one of the basic lessons, and it was called your first lesson. So there were the 7 basic lessons, and you chose one of them, and that was based on what you got. The way they changed it is now you have your first lesson, which is the initial one you get from your patron. This is going to give you a Hex cantrip. So you're only going to get 1 Hex cantrip. And that's going to be based on your style of play. At level 4, you have the option to choose, or at level 2, you have the option to choose a basic lesson. The basic lesson is a level 1 focus spell. So they made it so that instead of the way they did it in the playtest, which is you had your basic lessons, your advanced lessons, and your major lessons, now you have your starting lesson, your basic lessons, your advanced lessons, and your major lessons. It doesn't look like you have the ability to go back into any of the basic lessons again. So your basic lesson is one time, and then you can choose to go into any of the further lessons if you want to. Another major change is that you can only cast 1 Hex spell per turn. If you try to cast a second one, it automatically fails. That's a huge difference. They changed some of the Hex spells around in major ways. But it's, again, like, you got to read through them. I don't want to go over all the minutia with that. Another major difference is that Cackle is not for free anymore, and they made it completely different. So the way Cackle used to work is you basically could Cackle to extend all of your Hex spells by a turn. Now what Cackle does is you can, once per turn, spend a focus point to basically be able to not spend an action to extend one of your abilities. So the way they changed it is basically you can extend any of your abilities with the standard way of doing that, with your concentration, basically. You extend the spell. Now you can do that without spending an action by using Cackle, but instead of spending an action, it costs a focus point. So they massively nerfed Cackle, at least in my opinion. Another major change is that one of the 7 initial choices is now divine. So there is a divine option, or arcane option, multiple primal options, and multiple occult options. So you can choose to play any of the 4 caster types as a witch now, instead of just all but divine. And that's a huge, huge, huge change. That's basically all of the changes that happened for the witch. Again, a lot of feats were changed. Some feats were moved around, where things happened, what things happened, they were moved. But in general, the feats are basically the same as they were. Again, the witch is... I'd have to play it to say, like, I was excited to be able to play the witch when we were talking about this beforehand. Like, I was excited to try out the Investigator, the Oracle, and the witch. Less so of the Oracle of the 3, and now I'm more excited to try out the Investigator, more excited to try out the Oracle. I still don't care about the Swashbuckler, and honestly, they nerfed the witch into pretty badly. But one thing that they did do, and I'm a huge fan of this, and I did not know it until earlier today, is what they did with Misfortune, because Misfortune, they really didn't have a good way of being able to do it. So what they did with Misfortune is, instead of it now being a witch ability, it is now a first level occult spell. So, and just first level. So you can cast it as many times as you want at first level. You can have it be a favorite spell you can use it at higher spell levels, even though it doesn't do any additional things. But they made Misfortune into a first level spell instead of trying to balance it inside the witch and make it so you could cast it endlessly. Anybody who's played Pathfinder 1 knows that Misfortune was massively overpowered. And anybody who we talked about it with in the previous video knows that they massively nerfed it to the point where it wasn't even worth it. I think this was the correct decision, which makes it so that also if any other character wants to go occult, they can go into taking Misfortune as well as a first level spell, which I think is a fantastic idea. Now, there might be a couple of things that I missed, but in general, that's all of the major changes that happened with all 4 of those classes. There might be some wording changes that I missed in some of these abilities, but in general, again, if you take a look, they basically stayed the same. They just made the wording a little bit nicer. They moved around where things came in each class, but they are what they are. All 4 classes are definitely playable. All 4 classes are definitely a new addition to the game and give a different opportunity for role playing. But none of the 4 classes are massively overpowered. Swashbuckler in Pathfinder 1 was, and in this edition, it's still very strong, but I think they did a good job with it. So, let me know your thoughts. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me if you liked it. Tell me if you didn't like it. Tell me if you think I left anything out. Tell me if you think that I didn't leave anything out. Sort of. Let us know what's going on. Let us know if you want to see more videos like this in the future when new books do come out. But just let us know what's going on. I've been Jonathan from Boredom Sated. See you guys next time, and have a good day.